For instance, the high level of intel we have behind closed door and the public information about this is just astonishingly important. And we are suffering from this because the public behaves in a way as if nothing happened. And this is the opposite. And last but not least, concerning the elephant in the room question, maybe we should strategize more among allies and engage parliaments very methodically to entertain flow in information and of engagements also on the level of parliaments. Give me just one example. Each time I am with my colleagues from allied countries on the Hill, engaging with members of the US Congress, I can assure you that this is sometimes extremely challenging exercise, but you come back with the very concrete results. And we have to plan each month, almost each week, regardless the midterm or other considerations, how to be there and how to explain, because the number of members of US Congress visiting other continents is simply limited. And so oftentimes it is only a small group of travelers. And I think that we have to make this effort to be there regularly every week. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it is an intriguing idea to suggest that essentially Europeans have to market to the United States the importance of European security. But I think that's very useful to have said from your position in the Senate. Paul Johnson.
Yeah, a few things on intelligence reform as well. I think one of the lessons learned is that it's easier to predict capability than political intentions. We, of course, did an intelligence review conducted by Carl Bildt, which is no stranger to IISS, that was presented in June. I think one of the main conclusions is to work much more with open source intelligence than we actually have been doing before in the intel community, and the importance of fusion also between the political level and in intel community as well. How to sustain the investment in the long run? Well, what we are doing right now is going back to defense investment levels that were apparent during the Cold War, because we have a threat that is equivalent to the Cold War. So in that way, it is natural, of course, that we walk this way, and we've done it before in history. Now, I realize that many European countries are somewhere between a rock and a hard place, because we have low growth and we have high levels of national debt as well. Engaging, like Mark said, with your population, I think is absolutely crucial. I'm glad in Sweden we have all 8 parties stand behind us reaching NATO's capability goal and also the 3.5 by 2035. So we have a strong domestic support for doing it, but it's easier because we're actually quite low in debt. I think Camille questions, of course, and that's depending on what kind of US posture review we're going to be seeing. I think that's a very important question. If we are, of course, going to be being the foot soldiers, so to speak, or if we're also going to be replacing some of the more advanced capabilities and assets that the Americans have, especially, of course, that goes into the element of nuclear deterrence as well. Now, as the capability targets are shaped, they are, of course, meaning that Europeans will take a larger toll when it comes to the conventional deterrence of the alliance as well. But I think it's a very good question on some of the more difficult things to replace the Americans on: strategic lift capabilities, precision strike capabilities, space-based intelligence, and so forth as well. And that's going to take a longer time than just focusing on enablement, which is our predominant focus right now. And that also leads into the question we've been having about mass and scale and volumes. We know what we need to do. We need also to focus on the mass thing. That is of course a conclusion from the war in Ukraine. And in order to assure mass, we need to break the cost curve especially on a few sectors in the defense industrial base. And then just going back then also to Bastien and also to Ben's question, in regards to the competitiveness of the defense industrial base, there's a a lot of things that need to be done. One is because the defense industry is victim being the most regulated business on a global basis that costs money because our procurement circles are too long and too ineffective. The other one, of course, that affects it as well is that there's been a lack of long orders as well, ranging over time. So there is a predictability for the defense industry to actually invest into their production capacities. I do welcome more actors into the defense industry because the pie is twice the size, and it's good if we also can get new companies as well with new business models as well that can challenge some of the legacy platform producers, because we need a vibrant and competitive European defense industry market. Those who want to close off that market, I always say if we go for a single EU defense industrial market, it would be bad, expensive, and all have to buy from it. So let's also open up for an element of competition and flow of technology across the Atlantic.
Paul, thank you very much. I wonder whether I might ask you a follow-up question as a NATO defense minister, because everyone on this panel has spoken about capability gaps and the importance of procuring to actually meet defense capabilities. And I wonder whether there needs to be reform, not just at the national level amongst NATO states, but to a degree in the NATO institution itself. I mean, we at the IISS have often found that when, on defense economics, for example, NATO accepts the sort of percentage of GDP, more or less, that is submitted by each country. And our defense economist, former one, Lucy, is here and will report the same, and Fenella spoke about this yesterday. We actually try to do as much as we can a forensic analysis of what actually each country is really spending on defense. And so sometimes the IISS figure, irritatingly for some governments, slightly is different from what the announced NATO figure is. But that dialogue is not as strong as it should be. And the same thing is for defense capability gaps, because NATO asks every NATO member to submit their defense planning questionnaires and state what forces are available for a NATO mission. But is there truly an auditing capacity for that within NATO, in a way at least somehow to enforce a little bit more fulfillment of defense planning questionnaires that might have been submitted but not actually acted upon?
Yeah, I mean, the big challenge we have is to quickly transform economic clouds into combat power, and in order to have the ability both to fight tonight and to have a longer resilience in the ability that we would conduct such a warfare. And I think that the NDPP process, I think, is quite good in exercising a level of peer pressure on all the allies, and it's all very closely connected to the 3 new defense plans, which I think are vital. So we left this 5 generic plans to go to 3 threat-based plans, and now we know what we need in terms of assets and capabilities to deter. And that's new and it's novel, and the focus now should be make sure that those defense plans, which are drafted by SACEUR, but they are my defense plan and all other defense plans within the alliance, it's our defense plan, and make sure that those are executable. So there's been great progress within the alliance last 24 months, I would say, on the determination of reaching the capability targets. Now, we've been counting how much do the actual capability targets actually cost, and 3.5% is a good start, but they're quite demanding as well.
Thank you. So I'll return to the floor. I've got 3 questions. We'll be able to afford to take 2 or 3 more before returning to the panel and closing at our exact time. Lucy Berraud-Soudreau.
Thank you for the floor. My question is for Minister Janssen. You mentioned that part of the roadmap is to cut down bureaucracy and red tape. And you mentioned the European Commission's proposal for a defense omnibus regulation. But this simplification likely also needs to happen at the domestic level. Could you give examples of what is happening in Sweden also to cut red tape for procurement and to accelerate acquisitions? Thank you.
Thank you. And from Switzerland, Andreas Paparone.
Yes, thank you, John. I remember a time when, the Leopard 2 was on the Ukrainian shopping list. And I took the liberty of looking at it, and it's kind of metaphoric for the whole procurement and deployment cycle. The Leopard 2 is a wonderful tank. It has a high survivability. It's a wonderful piece of technology. And then I saw that it takes almost 1 year to make one. Russia now is probably deploying a new tank within several days, even if it's probably an old one. So apart from scaling up masses and breaking down the price, there's obviously some kind of trade-off needed in Western or European defense, in the Western European defense and procurement cycle. Which kind of trade-off would you suggest? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter McLear from Bombardier.
Yep. Hi, good morning. As stated, I'm Pete McLear with Bombardier Defense, a Canadian defense industry, the other country on the other side of the Atlantic, and participating in NATO defense and procurement. It strikes me, as the Lord said, pointed out, that the U.S. may, for some reason or another, be focused elsewhere, and Europe will have to cover some of the requirements on its own. And as you look to develop those capabilities, there are obvious surfaces and gaps and capabilities in the European market to meet those requirements, which gives you the opportunity to shape a peculiar European force. How does that look for industry, and what kind of capabilities can this new European defense focus have?
Thank you very much. At present, I don't have anyone else, but yes, I'm about to have someone. Have you pressed your microphone on? Spokesman from the Parliamentary Assembly, now you have. Therefore, your mic is on.
Thank you very much. First of all, to Jonsson, välkomna till NATO. It only took 75 years. We're happy to have you. I wonder, and this question kind of goes to the two politicians on the panel. So there is a mechanism to engage in parliamentary engagement amongst allies. As Mr. Jonsson knows very well, it's called the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And through it, we do engage with MPs across the transatlantic. One of the issues that the NATO Parliamentary Assembly has is that international engagements and travel are being increasingly negatively seen by the domestic audience. This is a big issue in the US, and it's becoming a bigger issue in Europe as well. And I wonder if you could speak to how maybe this interparliamentary diplomacy focus on defense could be better used to engage with our public, and how we could make our publics aware of the fact that we really need the alliance now. And I believe this ties to strategic messaging from MPs like yourselves. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So I'll now return to the panel in the order in which they first spoke, giving each exactly 2.5 minutes, because we have to be off the stage in 8 minutes. Klaus Johnson.
Okay, very briefly then in regards to omnibus defense, what matters is what we're doing on the national level. Here we're coming from a system that was very centralized, where it was make sure that you don't take risk. Now we need to take risk in order to assure growth. That means a much more efficient cooperation between government agencies within the armed forces, and between the government and the armed forces as well, to unleash that power, which is right now there's a certain taxation related to all the measures and the bureaucracy that we have to it, and something you really need to put management attention, because it won't happen by itself. That's my experience when it comes to trying to cut red tape. That is absolutely critical. Then in regards to parliamentary diplomacy, I think it's very good. I had the honor, of course, to briefly serve also on NATO's Parliamentary Assembly, and also to speak to it as well. I think it does a very important job. The kind of security that NATO now provides is more in demand than ever. I think there is a strong public support for increased defense investment, at least in Northern Europe, and there is indeed a very strong support for NATO's and also for our NATO membership. if I say one advice as a defense minister, I'm really the foreign minister of defense policy these days because we are traveling quite a lot as ministers and we need to run our department. We need to ensure that budgets is approved and then legislation is adopted. Every semester I have 2 EU meetings, 2 NATO meetings, 2 NODEFCO meetings, 1 JEF meeting. I have Ukraine Defense Contact Group every 6 weeks. I have the Northern Group and I have the JEF. So I'm spending a lot of time traveling. And what matters is what we do at home. So this is a challenge for us. We're a bit overstretched as defense ministers, but I do applaud everything we can do on the parliamentary side also.
And sorry for the IISS imposing on you the Shangri-La Dialogue, the Manama Dialogue, and the Prague Defence Summit as well, Paul. But thank you very much for having committed to all 3 of those. Senator Fischer.
I will take the last question on parliamentary and diplomacy. This is a real challenge because our public opinion is very sharp on our foreign expenditures, and even though you travel really very economically, this is always a pretext for criticism. I think that the way out is to create synergies. So when I was visiting the US Congress last years, each time it was with a group of people from Canada, Germany, UK, France, Italy, Poland, you name it. And I think that it creates a new quality, because this is not a tiny little country visiting US, this is marketing European defense. And I think that this is an approach that we have to take as one of the options. Second, I cannot speak for the Parliamentarian Assembly of NATO as a whole, but I think that it could do better job in our country, because I don't hear my colleagues who are members of this assembly to speak out really regularly about the issues they discuss behind closed door. And last but not least, I think that the government, which is so much exposed, as the minister just highlighted, to international agenda, that there is a real challenge how to explain to the constituency what is now at stake, has to strategize more with parliaments in order that there is a distribution of labor. And I think that there is a gap of synergy, at least in my country. So several ideas, and thank you very much for the challenge.
Thank you very much. Mark Sedgwick.
Thank you. Just on this question of communicating with the publics, there is a tendency for us to want to talk to ourselves among essentially the political, professional class, conferences like this, parliamentary engagement and so on. And that is clearly critically important, because in the end, we're democracies and our parliamentarians need to engage with the public. But there is also another way of doing it. So I've just participated in a podcast run by the Sky News defence correspondent Deborah Haynes, to try and find a way of sort of popularising some of these issues. And it's a war game. It simulates essentially an attack on the UK by Russia, with the United States not engaged, and essentially designed to reveal the gaps in our conventional capability and the invidious choices between essentially caving in and having to go all the way to the strategic nuclear deterrent. And he actually brings it out in a way that is more engaging to the public than people like any of us sitting on a late-night news program telling everyone how important all of this is. So there are other ways I think we need to think about getting this message into our public mind. Just on the industry question, I mean, the truth is, really, since the end of the Cold War, we postured our defence procurement for just-in-time delivery for essentially a situation where we were at peace, and we didn't resource the unglamorous business of having surge capacity, being able to ramp up production of munitions, let alone, as we heard from the Swiss colleague, building tanks, etc., faster. And so quite a lot of the 3.5% that Minister Johnson was talking about is going to have to go into the unglamorous business of building more capacity in our industrial base, not necessarily buying new headline fancy systems that people tend to want to announce. It's going to have to be some of that unglamorous stuff. It doesn't mean, by the way, maintaining massive inventories, because, of course, as we know, with the pace of innovation, those would simply be out of date. They wouldn't just rust, they'd be out of date. So we have to take this trick of being able to innovate, being able to have surge capacity, and also being able to discard old technologies and keep moving. And that is a different industrial model, and we obviously need to engage industry in working out how exactly we do that, because I don't think governments have that answer. I don't think industry has that answer entirely on its own either.
Well, Mark, thank you very much. And let me do two things now. First, invite you all to thank our speakers for what was a really extraordinary session. I'm really glad that this session was on the record, and I do hope that we've captured all of your remarks, some of which had to be written semi-extemporaneously. Others had maybe a day more to prepare, but I think this was a really rich discussion and put a lot of things out there that we need to proliferate through our own societies as well, and not amongst the elite who like talking about these issues. So allow me to thank all the speakers.
Thank you.
And the second thing I want to say is to invite Lord Sedwell, Pal Johnson, and Senator Fisher to assume the chairs there, and for all of you to stay in the room, because momentarily the Secretary-General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization will address this conference. Thank you. No, it's super, Mark.
Dear delegates to the second IISS Prague Defence Summit, I am delighted to open this next session for our keynote speaker. NATO nations are increasing their defense spending and investment. They have agreed new and demanding targets, and they are pursuing their capability and capacity challenges with renewed vigor. They have revived their consensus on these issues at the latest NATO summit in The Hague just a few months ago. And I think we all agree here that this is important and
vital work. It is work that requires constant attention and great political and diplomatic skill in the pursuit of credible deterrence and defense for the alliance. And the person leading that effort is, of course, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, and it is a real pleasure to welcome the Secretary-General of NATO to the second IISS Prague Defence Summit. The Secretary-General has just arrived, has come pretty much straight from the airport, so it is a real pleasure to have you here. He will deliver his remarks from the podium, and we will then have time for a few brief questions. Secretary-General, over to you, and welcome to the IISS.
Well, thank you, Dr. Girish, dear Bastian. And let me say thank you all for being here. And I see many faces I know, so I cannot hug you personally at the moment, but I would have loved to do that. And it's also good to be back in beautiful Prague. And it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to have this debate with you this morning. IISS has a reputation when it comes to assessing military capabilities. You know that. The military balance, if you will. So it comes as no surprise that we are here today, and I'm here today, to talk about European military capabilities and what we need to keep our continent safe. Now, but also in the future. And this is such a crucial topic. And you will not be surprised to hear me say that we need more than we currently have. A lot more, I can tell you. Because we face serious and lasting threats. Russia and China are investing heavily to build up and modernize their militaries. Their defense industries are producing weapons and heavy military equipment at a remarkable, I might say, at a staggering rate. And this is not just to show off at major military parades in Moscow or like yesterday in Beijing, but to aggressively exert influence, attempt to reshape the global order and undermine our freedom and security. This is at stake. Today, Russia allocates 40% of its budget on its war economy. 40%. So I'm not saying 14%, no, 40%, 40. And this year alone, it is expected to roll out at least 1,500 tanks, 3,000 armored vehicles, and hundreds of Iskander missiles. Yes, they are using this equipment against Ukraine. And we are working to end this aggression as quickly as possible and to secure a just and lasting peace. But we should not be naive. This trend is not going to shift or reverse anytime soon. Russia is, and for the foreseeable future, will remain a destabilizing and confrontational force in Europe and the world. And that's why when NATO leaders met in The Hague in June, our priorities were crystal clear. Invest a lot more in defense and speed up our defense production. And that's exactly what we are doing. Europe and North America together in NATO, and we are, I can tell you, already making progress. First, on defense spending. At the summit, as you know, NATO allies agreed to invest 5% of GDP in defense by 2035. 5%. And that's a lot of money, but it is what we need. This investment will fuel a substantial leap in our collective defense. Of the 5%, at least 3.5% of GDP will be invested in core defense requirements to fund our militaries and the equipment they need according to the traditional NATO definition of defense spending, something this crowd knows very well. And 1.5% will go towards investments that support our defense and security, like infrastructure, like cybersecurity, industry. We know what we need. At NATO, we have a clear and ambitious list of capability targets, and this 3.5% is anchored in those capability targets. They outline what each ally needs to provide to keep our 1 billion people safe. The details of this list, of course, are classified, But to give you an idea, we need to increase the number of air and missile defense systems 5-fold. We need thousands more armored vehicles and tanks. We need millions more artillery shells. We need more drones and cyber and space capabilities. So we have the shopping list. But to buy, we need the cash. And the good news is that there is already more cash on the table and even more will flow. European allies are really stepping up, including Czechia, which has plans to increase its core defense spending to 3% by 2030. So we need allied governments and politicians across the spectrum to make the tough choices and explain why it is necessary to invest if we are to ensure the safety, the security and prosperity of our people. But of course, cash alone can't provide security. We need the capabilities, real firepower, heavy metal, as well as new tech. And that's what our defense industry across the alliance needs to deliver, faster than ever, in Europe and also in the United States. Simply all over the alliance, we are not producing enough. And this brings me to my second point, defense production. Until recently, Russia was producing more ammunition than all NATO allies, including the US, including Turkey, the whole of NATO together. Much faster than we possibly could. And their economy is not bigger than Texas. So can you imagine that Texas, the state of Texas, producing more ammunition than the whole of NATO, including the US, Turkey, the whole of the EU, etc. But having recognized the problem, I can tell you that on this issue we are already turning the tide on defense production, and particularly when it comes to ammunition. If you look only at the countries of the European Union, their annual capacity to produce artillery ammunition will be 6 times that of just 2 years ago. 6 times. That's 2 million rounds by the end of this year. And again, that's only Europe. Czechia and its impressive defense industry contribute significantly, I can tell you, to this growth. And as a result, we are gradually refilling our stocks and narrowing the production gap with Russia. And this is my core message this morning. It's essential. It's essential for our own security and to keep supporting Ukraine like Czechia does through its unique ammunition initiative. And again, I want to thank Czechia for doing this. So we see very good trends, but there is still a lot more to do, including to accelerate production of more complex capabilities like tanks, like missiles and air defense systems. But also the kind of kit we see becoming an essential aspect of modern warfare, including drones. We need to build on our experience in ramping up the production of artillery shells, and we can certainly, by the way, learn here from Ukraine and Ukraine's rapid industrial mobilization, and, can I add, innovation. Since February 2022, Ukraine has ramped up its yearly artillery systems production from nearly 0 to well over 200 heavy artillery systems. So going from a single prototype to mass production in really record time. Crucially, Ukraine is now also one of the world's largest producers of autonomous systems, able to produce more than 4.5 million drones per year. And that's truly stunning. Imagine this across Europe and North America, and I believe that's our direction of travel. For the industry representatives in this room, there's massive opportunity. The demand for capabilities is real and urgent. It is on the rise and it will continue. We need all your help to further increase production lines, speed up innovation, and support development and production of the capabilities that allies need in Europe and in the US. There's also an added benefit for those who may not be industry executives or major investors. When industry steps up supply, the result is not only more security, but also more economic growth and many more jobs. So the defense dividend is real. We all stand to gain. From big industries and tech companies to ordinary citizens. Last week, in Unterlüss, in Germany, I visited a new Rheinmetall plant, and it is now creating 500 new jobs. And that's just one factory of many. And there will be many more on both sides of the Atlantic. And I believe this is a good news story. But I know that some may not see it that way. Some may worry about a new arms race, but our own aim, I can tell you, is not to provoke. Our aim is to protect and to ensure that we can continue to enjoy the freedom and security that we all hold so dear. The freedom and security that NATO was founded to preserve. We should not forget, our need to increase defense investment and production is in response to the threats we face. Russia's unprovoked war against Ukraine is the most obvious example of that threat. But the threat will not end when this war does, nor is the challenge limited to Russia. China, Iran and North Korea pose challenges individually and as a result of their cooperation. Only look at the pictures from Beijing the last couple of days and the hand-holding. They are increasing their defense industrial collaboration to unprecedented levels. They are preparing for long-term confrontation, and as I said earlier, the challenges we face are lasting. So we must be prepared. Of course, we have a real advantage in our unity and in the NATO alliance. This is not Europe alone, but Europe and North America together, all 32 of us, united in our commitment to collective defense, and united in our plans for how to deter and defend, day after day, year after year. And what's more, it's not only NATO, but NATO with our partners, the EU, Ukraine, and countries around the world, not least in the Indo-Pacific, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea. So it is a team effort. Together we have what it takes to prevail. We have world-class industries, we have innovative minds, and we have the freedom that allows innovation to thrive. Our capabilities are unsurpassed, and it is up to us to ensure they stay that way. Our future is therefore in our hands. We are combining our forces and leveraging our respective advantages. And that's how we will outproduce and outsmart our competitors. That's how we stay stronger, produce faster, and innovate better. And that's how we win the competition and preserve peace through strength. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Marvelous, marvelous. Secretary General, thank you so much for this very powerful message to the IISS Prague Defence Summit. And I'm very pleased that you also made it very clear that the defense dividend is real and it will reach many parts of society, not just that smaller, perhaps obvious defense industrial core. We now have 15 minutes for Q&A, so I will take perhaps 2 questions at a time, if that is okay, and then we'll keep going. People are already queuing up, so first one, please, Tom Waldron.
Thank you. So allies have capability targets. Should NATO also consider defense industrial targets?
That's admirably crisp. So do we need NATO defense industrial targets? Next, please, Matthias Gebauer from Der Spiegel.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Secretary. I have a question concerning the meeting. It's here.
He's there.
Very good. Yes.
Well, I have a question concerning the meeting on Ukraine security guarantees this afternoon. I'm wondering why you pointed out several times that it's really important now to also announce specific details about this possible security force. Can you elaborate a little bit why you highlight this importance even though Russia is clearly saying that they won't accept any NATO troops in Ukraine anytime soon.
Yes, but why are we interested in what Russia thinks about troops in Ukraine? It's a sovereign country. It's not for them to decide. I'm really amazed. I'm not criticizing you, but I hear this question, of course, more often. So thank you for asking the question. But I'm really amazed. Russia has nothing to do with this. It's the same like Finland then should have had a sort of a nod, a yes from Russia to join NATO. No, of course not. And Sweden, no. In the past, the fact that we founded NATO, we are sovereign nations. Ukraine is a sovereign nation. If Ukraine wants to have security guarantee forces in Ukraine to support a peace deal, it's up to them. Nobody else can decide about it. And I think we really have to stop making Putin too powerful. He is the governor of Texas, not more. So let's not take it too serious. And then on your first question about capability targets, I agree. So we have the capability targets, and basically flowing from there, of course, we know exactly what we need in terms of the defense industrial output. I'm really at stress to again make that point. Sometimes people think we do the 3.5% core defense spending for an audience of 1. No. It is a coincidence that by spending 3.5%, we equalize what Europeans and Canadians are spending and the US is spending, which is crucial, because we had to end that debate, which started with Eisenhower, basically saying that the US was paying more than the Europeans, and the US was totally right, and rightly irritated, and expecting the Europeans and Canada to step up. That's now happening, but the 3.5% is not. Yes, it is a coincidence that it equalizes with the US, but it's exactly the ballpark figure that you need to get to deliver the capability targets. And absolutely to the question, you need the defense industrial output. So I can tell you my country, the Netherlands, knows exactly, and I know from the Czechs and other countries, they know exactly what gear to buy to make sure that not only the people are there, but also they have the equipment to deliver their support to the overall endeavor if the phone call would come that Article 5 is triggered. So that's absolutely clear.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I'll take another group of 2, and Secretary General, we have a few delegates here from NATO's Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific partners. So we'll take a question from Chung-Min Lee from Korea. Chung-Min, mic is live.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. It's a real honor. I saw you last when you were Prime Minister in Seoul.
Yes.
My question to you, sir, is this. As you know, South Korea played a key role in supporting Polish rearmament because of the Ukrainian conflict. But this must be a two-way street. South Korea and Japan must buy arms also from our NATO partners. So from your position, what can the IP4 countries do to make sure that we are able to fill the gap with our European partners, but to also entice European companies to make sure that the gap that we face vis-a-vis the PRC and North Korea is also being filled with the help of our European industrial friends?
Thank you very much. Let me take one more, and I'll try and pick one that might hopefully align with this. From Australia, Latika Burke, your mic is live.
Thank you. Thanks, Bastian. Secretary General, you said in your speech, over here, Secretary General.
Yeah, hi, good morning.
Hi, thank you, good morning. You said in your speech that the threat from Russia will not end when the war ends. Then you said that China is preparing for long-term confrontation, looking at the pictures this week, and that we must be prepared. It's a team effort. But what does that team effort look like? Is it going beyond defence industrial collaboration, or are we talking about a combat role here?
Yeah, I don't think we will extend Article 5 to the Indo-Pacific. I don't think that will happen. But what you see increasingly happening is that the cooperation between NATO and the 4 countries in the Indo-Pacific, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, and the Republic of Korea, is getting stronger and stronger. And why? Because these theaters are connected. When I'm discussing this with the senior policymakers in the US, there is increasingly a realization that if China would one day decide to attack Taiwan, it will not be limited to that attack. Why would not first Xi Jinping call his junior partner in all of this, one Vladimir Putin, to also keep us busy here in Europe, in the Northern Atlantic area? And the US is absolutely convinced that for their long-term security, a secure Europe, a secure Arctic, but also a secure Atlantic is crucial. So this is all getting interconnected, and that is why we need that cooperation so closely. And that's why the American president, when I visited him in March, said, Mark, you have to make sure that the Indo-Pacific Four are present at the NATO summit in The Hague. And I was so happy that they were, and that we were able to continue that conversation. I visited Japan in April. I'm closely in contact with all the senior leaders in the Republic of Korea, and of course New Zealand and Australia. And to the question about defense production, the Republic of Korea is getting into the NATO markets. Why? Because NATO industries, until recently, were not producing enough. When it comes to ammunition, we are closing the gap. But on many other systems, we are not. And I'm asking industry in US and in Europe, why do you accept that? This is a free market, so if Poland is now buying for tens of billions Korean equipment, and they are totally entitled to do so, and why? Because it is good and it is delivered fast at NATO standards. But on the other hand, if I was Raytheon or Lockheed Martin or Rheinmetall or Leonardo, I would think, hey, that is strange, and why is this happening? So to your question, I want to thank you for the fact that you are filling the gaps at this moment in NATO, because we are not producing fast enough. And by the way, when it comes to shipbuilding and our Navy, and particularly the US Navy, I'm really worried, because this China has now more ships sailing than the US, and shipbuilding in the US is not at a rate that they can anywhere catch up on what China is doing at the moment. And also the European shipbuilding market is developed, and we have seen the new deals between the UK and Norway. But we need much more if we collectively want to fill that gap. So thank you to Korea. Of course, it would be great if we can also deliver some stuff to you and to Japan and others. I mean, I'm a center-right free market politician. I love free trade and earning money and getting some peace dividends from this. But at this moment, it's the other way around. You're filling the gaps in Europe and in North America.
Thank you very much. Let's take two more. We have from the UK, Charlie Edwards. Charlie.
Thank you, Bastian. Secretary-General, your predecessors have said that hybrid attacks or attacks in the so-called grey zone could in theory trigger Article 5, but isn't it increasingly obvious to the Kremlin that the alliance has no intention of invoking Article 5 over incidents involving fires at DHL warehouses and logistics hubs, subsea cables being cut, or cyber attacks on European critical infrastructure?
Thank you very much, Charlie. We'll take one more from the US, Daniel Michaels, also from the Wall Street Journal. Daniel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary-General. You've been over here on the far side.
Yes, hi.
Hi. You've been very
put
positive.
Put the journalist far away. Yeah.
Well, we'll put some light on the screen.
Okay, yeah. You've been very positive on the role of President Trump in NATO and in general. But when you look at the war in Ukraine and pressure on Russia, it doesn't seem to have increased. President Trump seems repeatedly to give two-week deadlines that get extended to other two-week deadlines. Are you getting at all frustrated with this? Are you in a position to say anything about what you think President Trump is doing or will do to, as you talked about, put pressure on President Putin to end the war in Ukraine? Thank you.
Let me give you three examples where I think President Trump is exactly doing the right stuff. First of all, do you really think, if he would not have been elected President of the United States, that Italy and Canada and Spain and Slovenia and Belgium and Luxembourg would have committed to do 2% this year? Do you really think that the whole of NATO would have committed to 5%? Committing to 5%, including 3.5% core defense spending at the NATO summit in The Hague? That therefore, I think this is one of his biggest foreign policy successes. That therefore the NATO alliance is having finally dealt with this enormous pebble in the shoe, this enormous irritant that Europeans and Canada were basically lecturing the Americans but not spending the money they had to spend. And now finally we are doing it so that we are equal because we need to defend ourselves, not only because we had to do this. This would never have happened without Trump. I'm absolutely convinced. When he became president, second reason, he immediately started to recognize the big threat of the Houthis. and he was willing to take clear action in March. Why didn't the Europeans do this? Because we couldn't. I feel really at loss about this. I remember the call I got that this would happen, and I said, well, great that you do this, you guys, but why are the Europeans not taking care of their own backyard? Because we can't. Because we don't have the military capabilities to do that. Now with the 3.55%, we can in the future, and we should. It is our backyard. It's not the US who should take care of the Houthis. It should have been the Europeans doing that. It's crazy that we leave it to them. But we can't, and I'm so happy he did. And then finally on Russia, he broke the deadlock. I mean, starting that conversation with Putin was important and crucial. He did. He took that leadership role, and this is not easy to solve this. But he is absolutely committed to doing that, and we are now working on these security guarantees necessary to make sure that also Zelensky knows that if he starts into conversations with the Russians, hopefully soon, that he has the backup, and that he knows that the security guarantees will in place so that Russia, after a peace deal, will never ever again to try to invade Ukraine. So no repeat of Budapest and no repeat of the Minsk agreement. So real security guarantees. Again, President Trump doing this. So yes, I am positive about what he is doing and his administration is doing, sorry, but I think it's crucial. I mean, reinventing NATO, getting the talks going with Putin, dealing with stuff the Europeans should have dealt with here in this neighborhood. I mean, I think 3 examples of clear leadership. And I'm not sure what would have happened if he was not elected. I don't think this would have been done. And we never have discussed 5%. To the other question, I mean, rightly, NATO is always very not talking about when Article 5 is yes or no triggered. It's there. I can assure you that anyone listening in from China or Russia or other people who wish us well, who think that we are not clear on this, our reaction will be devastating, based on the whole thing behind Article 5. And when it comes to hybrid, we are not naive. Hybrid is a cuddly word. It sounds nice, but it means assassination attacks, jamming of planes, attacks on the National Health Service in the United Kingdom, and many other examples. And that's exactly why NATO allies are extremely motivated and working day in, day out to counter this. And the Russians know that, and the Russians also know that when it comes to cutting undersea sea cables, because their merchant ships have not sufficiently been trained, and this is why they constantly have to cut undersea sea cables, because they don't know how the anchor can be taken up. So we will send some trainers to Russia to help them with this. But of course, you might also assume it was done intently, and that's why we have, within 10 days, Chris Cavoli, the previous Supreme Allied Commander, was able to get Baltic Sentry going after the latest incident between Estonia and Sweden on the 25th of December, in 10 days. So we are stepping up. The Russians know this. They hate it, and I love that. So that's good.
Excellent. Secretary General, you have a packed agenda today, so I'd like to thank you again for joining us today and giving us such a clear and energetic account of where we are and where we need to go. I think that is hugely helpful. So the Secretary General has to move on to other appointments. So before I invite you to thank him, can I just ask you to stay seated while the Secretary General exits?
You can still thank me.
So that you can still thank him, yes, while being seated, though. Thank you so much, Secretary General. Amazing. Thank you.